Okay, so I build amplifiers. I start from scratch. I build them here in the shop, and then when they're done, I always feel obligated to get them off as quickly as possible, to send them out, and so that whoever ordered it can get it quickly. So I do a terrible job of taking pictures and doing demo videos afterwards. So this one day, probably August of 2018, I just finished an amp, threw it in my car, drove. And within a mile here, there's a junkyard, and out front there was a '48 Ford F1. So it was a great looking truck, all mossy, and I shot some pictures there with the '48 Ford. Then I brought them back, put them online, and people started asking me, you know, hey, is that your shop truck? Is that your project? And I thought, no, but why not? So then I went and I asked the guy, you know, hey, what's the deal with that, and would you sell it, and how much? Turns out he had 5 of them, and he would sell me 1 complete truck. So I'd pick the best one, and then whatever's missing from mine, parts-wise, I could get off the other trucks. One of the first people that I called was David. So I remember I called David pretty early, and we talked through some stuff, and he invited me up to his shop.
I think I said, that sounds fun.
Yeah, and yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, what happened was I had told several other people, and they do what everybody does. They think you're crazy. And I called David and I asked him about it, you know, saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And yeah, his first reply was, yeah, sounds fun. And that's when I knew, yeah, this is gonna work.
Called the guy that owned the truck, Billy Ray. We weren't really sure who he was. I'm sure he was a real nice guy. We went back through the truck and we found the things that Billy Ray had done to personalize the truck. This truck was actually not too bad in the frame once we got all the garbage cut off of it. I tried to stick with Chris's plan. He'd done some research, you know, he does that. He felt like he had some pretty good ideas about where we were gonna go as far as the rear end, and he had the Jaguar front end, and he had to talk me into the whole Euro trash angle on the car, because I've worked on a lot of them, and all of this ever done has really just led me to dislike them more. But I did actually find a nugget in laying in a pile of Euro trash. So I have a newfound respect for a Jaguar front end.
Yeah, early pickup trucks like that have a real narrow front end, narrower than a modern pickup. And it turns out that the Jaguar front end is actually a little bit more narrow and tucks into the wheel wells so they don't stick out. In fact, actually it was the Australian guys that had figured that part out. Because apparently in Australia they have a bunch of these old F1 pickups, and they have a ton of Jaguars. So that's where I got the idea online. And it worked out pretty good. In fact, I went and pulled that Jaguar front end myself, and it was actually pretty easy to pull out. It was
a process of just trying it and stepping back and looking at it. But now that it's road tested and the functionality has been proven, basically, it's not a bad combination, really. It works pretty good.
The other thing that inspired it was I've been a NAMM show visitor for the last probably 7 years. I've been to the NAMM show, and I've run my business through all that time, and every time I go there I think, okay, if I had a booth here, what would make my booth different, or how would I do this? And the NAMM show is all about music guys, but most of those guys are car guys. They just are. And so I'm really excited to see what it's gonna look like when I can have a debut at the NAMM show with something that's different than what anybody's doing, by being able to have a car that is music themed, that we built ourselves, and it's pretty exciting.
Getting the glass in it was quite a challenge.
Windshield, really. I mean,
that was. I mean, honestly, that was
probably the hardest thing that we did was put the windshield in, just because it's so delicate. Too quick or too careless, and it's over. I mean, the thing's busted. So that was really challenging.
The homemade shifter handle with the, it's about 5-6 times as long as it was ever intended to be. So
yeah, it's so fun to drive though, because you can drive like this. You know, when you're, you can drive like this, yeah, put your hand on top of it, or you could grab it like this, or you could grab it down here, you know, and like throw back like this. So you basically have all these attitudes that you can have while you're driving that that kind of fit it, you know? When some dude rolls up next to you and looks at you funny, you know, you can rest on top, you know? And yeah.
It's the kind of shifter you can actually accidentally hit somebody in the mouth and it's plausible, like you could, you know.
Yeah, sorry, I was just shifting, yeah. One of the things I thought was interesting about the project was just being limited with how much I could spend on it. Like, I purposefully tried, like, this is not a catalog build. I'm not going through and just ordering stuff out of catalogs. I tried to keep that to a minimum. So it was, you know, David would message me, Facebook Marketplace, ads for different things along the way, and I would snag them, and then I was looking for stuff, and it really was, I mean, we did it as cheap as you could possibly do it. But it was fun to do it that way because as I found a new thing to use, then that would kind of change the way of, you know, the idea of how it would play out.
New challenge.
Yeah, it would be a new challenge, but the new challenge would then affect, you know, what it would ultimately look like. So it was just fun. It wasn't like sit down on day one and have a clear vision of what everything's going to look like. It's sort of like, okay, you know, going along and along the way, sort of making corrections or like finding stuff like, ooh, this would be great. And Facebook Marketplace, I met some interesting people too, you know, where you go and buy stuff from people and then they tell you their stories. And, you know, there's a great moment. I bought a industrial sewing machine to build a seat with. And it was in Nashville, and I go and I'm at this old man's house, and there was a younger guy there who's gonna help me load the sewing machine in the truck. Well, an industrial sewing machine is probably 150 pounds. And so this dude just jumps right up. He's like, hey man, I'll help you. So we lift this thing up in the truck and lay it down. Me and this other guy are just wrestling with him. He's just a random dude who's at this guy's house. And he's like, so what are you doing with this thing? What are you doing with this sewing machine? So I said, well, I build amplifiers. I'm building this truck for the NAMM show. And he's like, hold on, amplifiers? I've been Trisha Yearwood's guitar player for 20 years, and I currently am Garth Brooks' guitar player. And I'm sort of like, and so he tells me his name and everything. I look at him, and
Johnny Garcia.
Johnny Garcia was randomly like the guy who happened to be at this dude on Facebook Marketplace's house the moment that I loaded this thing into the truck. And
did you have a business card?
It was, you know.
I don't have a card. Yeah. Johnny, if you're out there.
Johnny, if you're out there, man, yeah, this is for you. Yeah, hopefully I'll see him at the NAMM show this summer, and he'll come by and he'll be like, oh, I remember you. What are the odds, you know?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts is the gear shift knob. It's not like anything you're going to see on the end of a shifter.
I was just thinking, what's this? I need something, you know. Your gear shift knob has to be just something special. And because I build amplifiers, I'm around tubes all the time, it just made sense, the right size. So I started just prototyping how to make it and figured out a way to make it where it lights up, and I think it looks great. And that started me on this whole side thing of doing keychains and little vacuum tube keychains, which, you know, I'm going to take to the NAMM show. So that's pretty exciting too.
Makes a nice Christmas gift.
Yeah, it makes a great Christmas gift. Yeah, good. Yeah.
I kind of like the little tailgate latches I made.
Yeah, those are great.
Out of rebar.
Yeah, the rebar. I got some real cheap hinge pieces for the tailgate because the tailgate was stuck. It was stuck up. We couldn't get it down. And so I thought, you know, they were frozen from the inside. So I bought these inexpensive replacements. And when you looked at those, they just look so different from the actual truck. And what wound up happening is we discovered that the rear end was actually out of alignment. It had been hit or something. And so once we bent it back into shape,
Billy Ray.
Billy Ray had hit something. And so it was out of alignment, so it made it so the gate wouldn't drop. And once we lined up the rear end, we were able to make the gate drop, and I didn't have to use those new hinges. But they wouldn't have worked because the truck it's got this age, and you just can't duplicate that in a new part. It's just almost impossible.
Yeah, and you wouldn't want to use a new technologically advanced tool, so we use a sledgehammer.
to align it, yeah. Yeah. I'll show you what my favorite part is just about. I remember talking about tires and telling David, like, man, I just want the fattest Whitewalls that you can get. I actually made some drawings, some hand drawings of what I hoped the truck would look like when it was done. And when I drew it out, I drew these big fat Whitewalls on it, and baby moons and fat Whitewalls. And I think that when you see the truck coming, the first thing that you see that really just pops is those tires.
And they do really good burnouts too.
And
right?
they do really good burnouts, yeah. When I looked over and saw David's pants on fire, and the reason it was a great moment is the man's he's got a bionic leg.
That's a nice piece though.
It's a nice piece.
This, believe it or not, from here to here, this thing cost about as much as you got in that truck.
I believe that.
It's a good piece.
So he's sitting there welding, and some of the spark hits, and would you believe that jean material is nice and flammable, and it just and it lit up. Now when I saw it, I didn't immediately think like, oh man, my friend's on fire. I immediately started laughing because, well, I knew he didn't, you know.
They can't feel that.
He ain't got
it'll be a while before he feels that.
You ain't even got no knee. But it looked like the Terminator, you know, like when the Terminator's face is like blowing away and he's like robot under there.
But since heat rises, I
did
feel it.
I could see the heat was rising, and I think I probably said like, hey, your pants on fire.
Hey, my rear end is feeling kind of warm.
Man, I think your pants is on fire. Yeah, that was a good moment.
You know the difference between a Yugo and a Jehovah's Witness?
No.
You can slam the door on a Jehovah's Witness. Nobody that ever saw this truck on the dealership lot, whatever, think that this truck would look the way it does. But it's now that it's done and functioning as a unit, it really makes a statement.
Well, that's our story. We're sticking to it. Thanks for watching how we took this truck and brought it back. It's back on the road, turning heads. If you want to see it yourself, come to the NAMM Show 2020 in Nashville at the Convention Center. And I'm talking to you, Johnny Garcia. I'll see you there. We'll be there on the floor. You can check the whole thing out. And until then, check out this highlight video.